Well, we like to go there and fish. So it's the summer. It's June, about 10:30. Me and a friend were just fishing for carp and brim, and it's like, okay, it's about 10:30. We're gonna head back. So he's heading up. He's already packed up, and he's already up this hill beyond the tree line, going back home. I'm just behind him, and I'm just into the tree line when I hear a sound. It's the call of something. I'd never heard it before. I'm like, that's weird. So I stick my head out from behind the tree line, and I see come around the corner. Essentially, it snakes all the way through DeSoto, Duncanville, Lancaster, and I'm in a straightaway. I'm basically midway in the middle of this straightaway, right? So I see this thing come around the bend, and I think it is the biggest blue heron I've ever seen in my life. So remember, it's about 10:30, and so the light's coming down, and this is limestone on the other side, so this is very well lit. And this thing's coming at me, and I can tell because, again, we're about 15, 20 feet across as far as the width of the creek. So I know how big this thing is. Man, it's a really big blue heron. It's the same color as a blue heron, sort of a bluish gray. And I thought it's, when a heron flies, it does that S-curve thing with its neck, right? Where its long neck kind of doubles back, and its legs shoot out behind it. And, their feet. That's what I think I'm seeing as it's coming at me. And then, like I said, I'm kind of on this hill going up a little bit, and it gets right in front of my face. Its right wingtip is 5 feet from me. It's at that moment I realize I am not looking at something with feathers. This thing's it's all skin. And what I thought had been its legs sticking out from behind it was actually a long flanged tail.
It's time for the Strange O'Clock podcast, where you get to hear strange news with Christian views. Welcome to the Strange O'Clock podcast. Once again with Michael and Jerry. We have our special and unique host tonight, Jason McLean. He is the author of How UFOs and Bigfoot Prove the Bible is True. Welcome, Jason. Glad to have
Howdy.
you.
Hey, Jason.
Glad to be here.
We're
Pleasure
glad
to be
that you're
here.
here. We're blessed and elated that you're on with us tonight. All right, folks. So if you're not familiar with Jason McLean, here is his mini bio. He's an artist and biblical paranormal researcher. Jason McLean lives in Waxahachie, Texas, with his 3 children and beautiful long-suffering wife. Beyond his lifelong love of art and comics, Jason's life has been consumed with the study of archaeology, cryptozoology, ufology, and astronomy in order to better understand the Bible, its teachings, and the one behind its creation. These passions have prompted him to create the Society for the Investigation and Research of the Unexplained, SIRU, or CIRU, and the books found on Amazon. And this is the book that I happened to find on Amazon because I put in the search words Bigfoot and Bible, and I wanted to see what scriptures were there or if there was any podcasts or YouTubes, or in this case, books on it. And thankfully, Jason has merged these two interesting worlds together of the Bible and Bigfoot, or the Bible and UFOs. So you're definitely one of a kind, Jason, for sure. Okay, so the book that I stumbled on that I just mentioned, the book description is, are UFOs aliens, cryptozoological animals, and other paranormal activity evidence that the Christian worldview is wrong? Or does the Bible give us a reason to predict that dinosaurs and strange visitors bent on creating a hybrid race would haunt our modern planet? Moreover, what should the church do about it? Discover the answers to these questions and many others. Do 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 do. So, Jason, tell us about yourself and what. How did you come to know the Lord briefly, and how did you come to this conclusion that the Bible confirms, or rather, these creatures confirm that the Bible is true?
Okay, so probably the quick version of this. So I grew up, in just outside of Dallas, Texas, small town, small suburb called DeSoto. Uh, Evangelical church, just sort of raised in it. I'd go visit. My dad would take me down to visit the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Dr. Bog. Got to see the London Hammer, the Delk print, things like that. But as far as my Christianity is concerned, my father, who was a mechanic, believed that he told me very young, he's like, look, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but you got to argue it to me. Tell me why you actually believe this. Because, and I forget who said it first. He wasn't the originator of this idea, but God has no grandchildren. So it's like if I was going to be a Christian, I had to become the Christian. So I asked questions. And the thing is, as my life has gone on, whether it was, younger, even now, all I can find is more evidence as to why the Bible is the more legitimate and truthful presentation of history. And basically the premise of the book and all of my work is, if the beginning of the book and the ending of the book are true, then the middle of the book is what's important. This is what people are like, what is Bigfoot and what does this have to do with someone's life? It's like, it's about the worldview. I believe that worldview is because people say, but philosophy and politics, and I'm like, worldview is the father of politics and of philosophy and of culture. If your worldview is wrong, all the rest of it's going to be screwed up no matter what you do. I've come to the big thing I've really come to over the last really 30 years is that the modern church does not actually have a biblical worldview and runs from it every chance it gets. At some point in the last 150 years, the church in the West gave the idea of reality to, we'll call it science. It's not actual science. We'll talk about that more, but in this fake science, it's actually, this is where people are like, oh, it's science versus religion. No, it's not. It's a religion versus a religion. And we gave it over to this secular atheist religion that's masquerading as science. And so this is why we have people leaving the faith. This is why the Western church is so weak, because it doesn't actually believe in the Bible. And so here we are rapidly approaching Revelation, the events of Revelation, and all of these weird things keep popping up. And I was like, I don't know what to do with it. Well, maybe if you actually believed what the Bible said, you would know what it is and how to handle it and what it means, more importantly, and how to protect yourself from it. So that's what my work is about. Like I said, my father said, God does not have grandchildren. You are going to have to go to him and tell him who you are. Why do you believe in him? You can't just say, well, my father was a Christian. That doesn't work. So I looked into it. I checked out the other religions. And the only inescapable fact I can come back to is the Bible is the most accurate representation of history, which means its truth claims are real. The things we actually see are what's reflected in the Bible. And so that's how I got here. How I got into all of this weirdness. Well, partly it was that's what I was looking into, right? If you really want to study archaeology honestly, and you're a bit of an iconoclast like me, and you don't like it when people say, don't look at this, I'm like, well, then I'm going to go look at that. That's what I want to look at, because if you don't like it, then I need to know why you don't like it. So, with archaeology, that was sort of my thing. But if I'm going to be honest, the thing that really got me into it, even though I didn't realize it at the time, was I saw a living pterosaur when I was about 12. And the thing was, its right wingtip was 5 feet from my face. And I spent the next 20 years trying to pretend it didn't happen. Even after I learned that there were people who had encounters with living pterosaurs in Texas, I'm like, nah, I didn't see it, because that was all South Texas. I'm just outside Dallas. There's no way these things could remain hidden. And yet I got drug in, and then I met Ken Gerhardt. I knew him for years before I ever told my story, because I still didn't believe my account. That I found out that people did see these things in southern Oklahoma. And so it sent me looking, and I started realizing I knew people who had seen them. They didn't tell anybody. It wasn't until I came out that people were like, whoa, 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 you've seen these? I've seen them too.
Wow,
So here we are.
that's huge.
Awesome.
Do you care to elaborate a little bit about your encounter just briefly? Like, I'm sure you've shared it many times, but our
Sure, yeah.
audience might not have ever heard any of anyone that's even seen one.
So yeah, the very fast version is so again, grew up in DeSoto, Texas. It's a suburb of Dallas. Like the northern border of DeSoto is Dallas, right? That's how close we are. Um, but there is a creek called the 10 Mile Creek. It runs for 10 miles, obviously. Texans are great at a lot of things. Creative naming is not one of them. Like we named Cedar Hill because it's a hill with a lot of cedar trees. You know, Round Rock, Texas. Why is it Round Rock, Texas? Because that's where this giant round rock was, and if you saw it, you knew it was safe to cross the river. We are great at things. We are terrible at naming things. So 10 Mile Creek, it's a creek that runs for 10 miles. Well, North Texas sits on a giant slab of limestone. And so this creek cuts very deeply into that limestone, 15, 20 feet in most places. And it's very steep as far as the walls go on either side, except for a few places where the walls have sort of collapsed in for the rains to get in. Well, we like to go there and fish. So it's the summer, it's June, about 10:30. Me and a friend were just fishing for carp and brim. And it's like, okay, it's about 10:30. We're going to head back. So he's heading up. He's already packed up and he's already up this hill beyond the tree line going back home. I'm just behind him, and I'm just into the tree line when I hear a sound. It's the call of something. I'd never heard it before. I'm like, that's weird. So I stick my head out from behind the tree line and I see come around the corner. Essentially, it snakes all the way through DeSoto, Duncanville, Lancaster, and I'm in a. Well, we like to go there and fish. So it's the summer. It's June, about 10:30. Me and a friend were just fishing for carp and brim, and it's like, okay, it's about 10:30. We're gonna head back. So he's heading up. He's already packed up and he's already up this hill beyond the tree line going back home. I'm just behind him, and I'm just into the tree line when I hear a sound. It's the call of something. I'd never heard it before. I'm like, that's weird. So I stick my head out from behind the tree line and I see come around the corner. Essentially, it snakes all the way through DeSoto, Duncanville, Lancaster, and I'm in a straightaway. I'm basically midway in the middle of this straightaway, right? So I see this thing come around the bend, and I think it is the biggest blue heron I've ever seen in my life. So remember, it's about 10:30, and so the light's coming down, and this is limestone on the other side, so this is very well lit. And this thing's coming at me, and I can tell because, again, we're about 15, 20 feet across as far as the width of the creek. So I know how big this thing is. Man, it's a really big blue heron. It's the same color as a blue heron, sort of a bluish gray. And I thought it's, when a heron flies, it does that S-curve thing with its neck, right? Where its
Right.
long neck kind of doubles back, and its legs shoot out behind it. And,
Okay.
their feet. That's what I think I'm seeing as it's coming at me. And then, like I said, I'm kind of on this hill going up a little bit, and it gets right in front of my face. Its right wingtip is 5 feet from me. It's at that moment I realize I am not looking at something with feathers. This thing's it's all skin. And what I thought had been its
Wow.
legs sticking out from behind it was actually a long flanged tail. And like it was just long and had a sort of an oval shaped thing at the end of it. And I was watching it and just flew, and then it turned and went away. And I never saw it again. Well, let me phrase this. There's a couple times like recently in the last 5 years where I've may have seen it near this same creek or something similar, but I didn't get a good enough look to say definitively. So I'm like, okay, I'm out. That one was the first one, and anything else your mind can make up.
Yeah.
I didn't believe it. I just didn't believe that I could have seen a living pterosaur, even though at the time I believed that there were living pterosaurs, like in the Ropin of Papua New Guinea. Like I said, I spent my summers going down and looking at the Creation Evidence Museum, and I heard these stories of living dinosaurs from around the world. I was already into this stuff, but I didn't believe it could be here in Texas, much less North Texas. And a few years later, there was an NBC special called The Mysterious Origins of Man. And that's when I started hearing about the living pterosaurs down the Rio Grande Valley. But still, I'm like, nah, that can't be it. Flash forward, here we are. And so, yeah, other people have seen these things, and everyone says the same story. I thought it was a crane. I thought it was a pelican. I've got one who said they thought it was like an owl. That's because she was driving at night and it pulled in front of her in her headlights. And she's like, that's a pterosaur. She's got brothers. She's seen all the toys. She's like, this is a pterosaur. So enough people have seen these things that I know it's not just me. My mind did not make this up because we all said the same thing. And most of these accounts are in broad daylight. I only have one that's at night, but these things seem to be mostly nocturnal. So you usually are seen in the sort of the earlier morning. So the question then becomes, isn't Occam's actually? I'm sorry. Let me rephrase this. I've now got two nighttime accounts where it was definitively a pterosaur. I've got a lot of accounts at night of large birds.
Okay.
But again, bird being in quotation marks, right? Because they don't know what they saw exactly.
And all in Texas mostly, or in Oklahoma?
Texas and southern Oklahoma.
Wow.
So and there's enough where we see a pattern of travel where this is more indicative of a living species than say something paranormal. I can't rule out that this is some sort of paranormal event until we have a body, until we have one that's alive that we can poke it with a stick, right? I can't say that it's not paranormal, but it's more indicative of a real life creature that is being cited than a paranormal event, because paranormal events have other surrounding things that you have hauntings. Even the creatures will sort of haunt the person that's having the eyewitness account. So this specific creature does not seem to have those telltale signs. So
well, I'm just a side dinosaur researcher personally, and I saw the latest Jurassic Park with where Tim Cook is the bad guy, and they have just some of the cheesiest looking effects ever. It looks like something made decades ago or worse. But when you see the classic dinosaurs, and no, I really was a huge dinosaur geek. As you described that pterosaur with the oval in the tail, racking my brain, I believe that there are quite a few archaeological digs of that type of bird, of that type of skeleton. So, and it just, and it's so cool to hear the color. And has there been any ideas of like what they eat or any kind of scientific understanding of where they might be hiding out? I mean, probably caves, I guess, but
yeah. So that is the big question. So what I saw, the basic assumption that most of us have is that it's of the rhamphorhynchoid family. There's basically two groups of pterosaur. You have your pteranodons, which have short stubby tails and large crests. They tend to be much larger. This is your pteranodons, your Quetzalcoatlus, and others. Then you have your rhamphorhynchoids, which are much smaller on average. Most are very, very small, but there are some that were 8 to 10 feet across as far as their wingspan goes, and they have long tails with flanges on them. So, and the main thing about the rhamphorhynchus, and this is an important detail, is that the rhamphorhynchus itself means tooth-beaked because basically it looks like a reptile, like lots of sharp teeth, but it has one at the very tip of its nose. So it looks like a beak, but it's not. It just has a tooth coming out of it. Well, the reason that's important is that we have accounts throughout history, particularly in Europe, of creatures like this being seen, being drawn. We would call them wyverns, right? And so it's an important detail because people have seen these things. What do they eat? No one really knows. It's theorized that they're probably like most things, they will scavenge, but it's believed that they're probably more feeding on fish. They seem to be they seem to be seen a lot around bodies of water. But again, they go out west where there's not a lot of water. So they're probably there's a lot of accounts of these things predating, sort of scavenging on dead bodies. At least the ones in the Rio Grande Valley. In fact, there's several accounts of the larger ones breaking up, and attack, funerals and attacking the body. And because it looks like they're
What?
probably scavengers. Now, that's the thing. There's a big question because a lot of there are accounts of much, much larger ones being seen. Sometimes they're drawn as having a pteranodon crest, but a long flange tail, which is weird because it's counter to what we know. Sometimes that tail isn't there. And again, the one I saw was only 8 to 10 feet as far as the wingspan goes. So there's the question is, are there two different species, or are we seeing one species at different stages of development? That's what we don't know yet. So it may be that, they'll do fish and small reptiles, and then as they grow, they'll scavenge more depending on their location. So we don't really know, but we have theories.
The one that you saw, you believe, is a smaller species than, say, the pterodactyl and Quetzalcoatl. Yeah. Those, okay.
Yeah, it was definitely a rhamphorhynchoid, because of the tail, right? Yeah. But again, does that mean that they can't grow larger? The thing we have to remember is all of the fossils we have are flash frozen, metaphorically speaking, they're flash frozen, of what was alive at the time of the flood.
Right.
They were frozen in time. So we don't know, did rhamphorhynchoids get bigger? We don't know. These are the ones that were preserved. They may have gotten much larger than we're aware of. All we can do is say, well, this is the one we found, and that's it. And also, we don't know what's changed in the last so many thousands of years, right?
Sure.
They've had to grow and adapt and change this environment just like beavers have, and just like elephants and cows and whatever, right? Everything's had to adapt to this new environment. So we don't know what changes it's gone through over the last however many thousand years you think the flood occurred. So we don't know if there's two different species, but there may be more different species running around worldwide, or maybe one at multiple stages of development. That's one of the bigger questions we have. And again, until we have a body, like I said, until we can poke one with a stick scientifically, we don't know if it's not, I can't sit here and say honestly, definitively, that it's not some kind of paranormal event, right? I can't. Okay. But what I can say is it's more consistent with a living creature, and it's one of the things you would expect. Going back to the idea of the biblical worldview, it is something you would expect to find, along with Mokelium bembe, which looks to be a sauropod, or any of these other things that don't seem to fit in our world today, right? We call it cryptozoology. These are the study of hidden animals. And if we'll just throw Sasquatch in there because he's really more of a coverall for the cryptozoological world, right? Yes. If we work from the assumption that he is, and like I said, that Sasquatch is where things get interesting, but let's work at the physical versions. Because one of the things we've really sort of discovered in the research is, I think the word Sasquatch is, a lot of things are being put into the Sasquatch box that do not belong there. And I think there's a lot of paranormal activity. And I think that I'll just call them demons, the Shahadim, are actually wanting us to think of them as Bigfoot in a lot of these cases so that people don't recognize them for what they are. And so, but on the physical, if we just assume, again, just one theory is that it's a living example of Gigantopithecus. Okay, cool. Well, it's not supposed to be here. Just like the pterosaurs, just like Mokelium bembe is a sauropod, just like any of the other, the Zoolodon that looks like it may be Cadborosaurus and Altamaha, the giant beavers in Canada. Looks like there are plenty of accounts of these giant mega birds that we would call teratorns. All of these things aren't supposed to be here. They were supposed to have died out hundreds of thousands of years ago, or millions of years ago. So why are we seeing them? Well, the obvious answer is, if the Bible is true, whether it happened 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago, there was a perfect world that was destroyed cataclysmically, and everything that survived has made it through and has grown and adapted to this new environment. What you'd expect to find is sort of two things. One, you would expect that the creatures on this on this side of the cataclysm would be, it was a perfect world. They lived hundreds of years. They would be larger. They would be more robust. They would be healthier, more diverse. That's what we see. We see beavers the size of Volkswagens. We've got armadillos. The glyptodont was the size of a Volkswagen Bug. We've got birds with wingspans the size of buses. The Megalania was literally a Komodo dragon the size of a bus. Bisons that just dwarf, that were the size of modern elephants. On and on it goes. Well, that's what you expect to find. And then you would expect that everything living today would be a lesser version of what was seen then. And that's also what we see.
Jason,
yeah,
just to interject here, like,
sure.
as a homeschooler who got to go to those conferences in the 90s, my mom
Yeah.
would take me and, all right, kids, you want to hear the sound of Mokili Mumbwembe? And then tell us the
Yeah.
whole story. And, you know, perfect pronunciation, by the way. I've always been a big fan of Mokili Mumbwembe. It sounds like the people that went to go and find it had to travel for quite a long while through jungles with like no
Oh, yeah.
pathways. And do you think that these giant creatures have somehow managed to find kind of a secluded, kind of sequestered, or however you say, place to hide from? Like they might understand that if we find a giant whatever, like we'll probably go and try to kill it, or a bunch of cowboys in Nebraska are going to go after the giant bison,
Yep.
or I don't know. How did
Yeah,
they make
no.
it this long? What, you know,
No,
according
that's
to your
exactly
research?
it. That's exactly it. Is that so? Yeah. Again, it's like everything that survived and made into this world did one of two things. It adapted and became what we see today, which is everywhere, right? Or they stayed exactly the same and they weren't able to acclimate as well, right? Which means they didn't become, you know, look at armadillos, right? There's all these different species of armadillos and they're all over the place. You know, we call them the Texas speed bump, right?
I love it.
You know, but there are accounts of giant glyptodonts, of shells being used by indigenous peoples
Right.
when the Spanish first got here. So the things that didn't change, that didn't fully adapt to this new environment, they weren't as prosperous, so they became rare. And then that makes them very easy for us to kill. And if these are creatures that seem to be ill-tempered, many of them are, then yeah, as humans, we're going to look at them and be like, hey, you're ill-tempered and you're big, I'm going to kill you. There's a story, one of the most important dragon stories you will ever read is about the dragon of Rhodes. And I'll, again, very long story, but it's during the Crusades, like 1033. And there's a monastery on Rhodes, but it's also like a guard post full of these warrior monk knights kind of thing. And there is a dragon that is terrorizing pilgrims and eating animals. And so like they're like, okay, we're gonna go kill this thing. This thing kills knights. And it was so bad that they're like, that the guy who was running the garrison says, no, we're not doing this anymore. And one of the monks, these knightly monks, says, no, forget that. I'm going to go kill this thing. So he goes home, spends everything that he has building a mock-up of this thing to train for a year. He gets the best armor he can get. He gets the best weaponry he can get. He goes back, eventually kills this thing, and then gets locked up for his trouble because he went AWOL. So he wrote, the head of the dragon is recorded as being on the city gates for decades. So he writes a letter to the Pope and says, I killed a dragon. I shouldn't be in this chamber cell. And the Pope's like, guys, let him out. He went AWOL. We don't like what he did or how he did, but he did kill this thing that y'all couldn't kill. He's ended a scourge. He ends up eventually becoming, after the guy who was running the garrison dies, he becomes the head of that order, and he is buried there, and his sepulcher calls him Draconis Extinctor. This story and the records are in the records of this garrison. We know this actually happened. He describes the dragon. So this thing happened. These creatures, a lot of them, again, Mokele Mbembe seems to be a rather violent creature whenever people come across it. It looks like these things were violent. They were killed whenever they made themselves a nuisance, which is what, and again, if you weren't populating quickly, you know, look at the panda. We can't get those things to procreate, you know? if pandas were a nuisance, they'd have been extinct hundreds of years ago. And then we have had massive climatic changes over the centuries, right? The Earth's ecosystem is wildly unstable post flood, so a lot of this has wiped out a lot of these creatures as well. But that's what you'd expect to find. You expect for some creatures to remain the same and not be as plentiful, which is why they die out and they go into mythology, right? People remember seeing these things, they encountered them, but they're gone. And then you'd have all the rest of them that did adapt to the new environment. They were very successful, and that's what we know as normal animals. But these other things, these pterosaurs, these Bigfoot, the McLean Bembe, all these things are just remnants of a world long past. And that's also why the modern world doesn't like to look at these stories, because they
Right.
recognize that it is these creatures' existence are anathema to their religious doctrine. Because again, it isn't science versus religion, it's a religion versus a religion. Science is a
Yeah.
tool. That's all it is.
Yes.
And science should say, okay, well, here's the data. Let's follow it where it is.
Yeah.
I saw it when I was starting to become an archaeologist. You find the wrong thing, you get to become a florist, because they're not actually interested in the truth. They have to present enough truth to give themselves credibility to wipe away the stuff that is really damaging to their theories. There are people doing good work in archaeology today. I love what's out there. The problem is it's done within a very narrow field, right? And that's done for credibility because they've got this much larger story that they're trying to prop up, and they need to maintain some degree of credibility in both the scientific world and in the public. So there are good people doing good work, absolutely. The problem is the important stuff is never the stuff that says, hey, the Bible is what's accurate, this other stuff is just crap. They're not going to let that out there because it is a war of religion.
Right. Jason, along those lines,
Mhm.
where we're talking about how these living dinosaurs
Mhm.
and large animals seem to verify the Bible's timeline, do you think there's a larger agenda here to push the evolutionary theory that there is a progression and an evolution of
Mhm.
creatures and species rather than a de-evolution? And what's that word? I can't think of that word where there's like things are getting older and lesser rather than evolving and getting bigger.
They're degenerating.
Degeneration.
Degeneration, a word like that. But anyway,
Yeah.
basically, so do you think that there is an evolutionary agenda to push out these encounters and these news articles and websites and videos of encounters with living dinosaurs to say, oh, that's all long past. That was 100 million
Mhm.
years ago. That was in the Mesozoic period or what have you, way before humans were ever around. Do you think that there is a reason behind that?
Well, yeah, it is the narrative. Again, this is religion versus religion. We have an
Yes.
atheist Darwinian religion that masquerades behind science as its support because it is a religious viewpoint. It is a C.S. Lewis called it, and this is where the UFO thing kind of ties into it as well from a thematic point. C.S. Lewis talked about in the Screw Tape Letters the theory of a materialist witch, right? And this is one of the most keen insights I've ever read from any theologian ever. He speculated that you could create because in the book he said the thing about a witch is that you can terrorize the demons can terrorize the human directly, which is a lot of fun. They love doing it. But a witch must eventually think about God and contemplate God. A materialist never does that. A materialist never thinks about God. So they were trying to come up with, so he theorizes that there would be a way to have a materialist switch so that you could have someone who would believe in the supernatural, but not believe in the supernatural at the same time. It could be equated to materialist propaganda, essentially. And what we see is we have the Darwinian atheists. That is the materials. It's like there is no supernatural. It's just all meat and pulleys and strings. And that requires billions of years. It requires millions of years of evolution from here to here and here to here. It's the one line right. I use okay because I'm a nerd. If you grew up watching Star
That's
Trek,
good.
like the Next Generation,
I have.
everyone heard about what was the one thing that was breaking down? The Heisenberg compensators was always the thing that was that data and then we're trying to fix, right? And the reason for that is after the original series came out, people started to realize there was the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. It said you can know the direction or you can know the speed of an atom, but you can't know both, right? It's called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You can know one, but you can't know the other. So they came up with this one word or this one sentence workaround, right? It's the thing that allows the impossible thing to happen in science fiction stories. So the Star Trek, it's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. In this Darwinian atheistic religion that is masquerading as science, their workaround is billions of years of evolution. That's their workaround. It's why do we have creatures that are so perfectly suited to do XYZ? Billions of years of evolution. Why can this animal digest this one impossible millions of years of evolution from this thing, right? Why do we have that's their workaround. They need millions upon millions upon millions upon tens of millions of years of evolution for their religion to work. And the reason that's important is the new lie of the whole UFO thing, right? The aliens. That's the new lie. That's the religion of the Antichrist. And so they're going to bring the paranormal into it that way. But you still need this billions of years and millions of years of evolution. So anything that would say, hey, you don't got millions of years of evolution. You've got at best 15,000 years of history. And there is a flood. And by the way, the Bible's the more accurate version of the story.
That's right.
Well, then you got a problem because then you run across the truth claims. If you don't have millions of years of evolution, then then how did we get here? You need this illusion of deep time for their religion to work. And because if there isn't,
Yes.
then their religion doesn't work and ours does. And that's what they can't have. So yes, there's absolutely an agenda. It's not even hidden. It is propaganda. Like, it's not even a theory. I was in a class, and this is why I didn't pursue one of the reasons I didn't end up pursuing my archaeology career was the guy who basically was my minor in archaeology because I couldn't technically major in it. I was going to do that in long story. Anyway, he was explaining because he basically wrote the history of the Caddo in East Texas. And he was explaining how he had come across a site that the radiocarbon dating was coming back as 50,000 years. He goes, that wasn't accurate. There's no way it could be accurate. So he came up with this idea because he found out there was a coal mine like a mile and a half away from this site. They said they found coal and were burning it, and that threw off their radiocarbon dating. And everyone in the class is, oh, how wonderful, how smart he was. And I'm over here like, you just told them how to fake a radiocarbon test. There is zero evidence at all that they were finding coal from this coal seam and using it to burn in their fires. You have zero evidence, not one. There's, as I smack my mic around like I haven't seen it here for the last 3 years. It's like, you've got zero reason to believe that this is a thing, and yet and everyone's like, oh, it's so what? That's not science. That's what Charles Fort called and Ivan T. Sanderson called the wipe. Something spectacular happens that doesn't fit within this very narrow window of what reality is, according to this atheistic Darwinism, this materialist religion. There's an account, there's a story, everyone takes it credibly. Then someone comes along and says, here's the obvious lie and fig leaf that everyone can believe, and then ignore what happened. That's what he did. And that's what happens all the time. We see all these accounts of people finding something, seeing something, and then someone comes along and says, nope, it's faked. Great. Where's your evidence that it's faked?
Jason, can I add one thing to all
Sure.
the brilliant things
Please.
that you're sharing? In my journeys, I found G.K. Chesterton after reading C.S. Lewis's autobiography. He said this book called The Everlasting Man was what saved him. And so I studied this thing backwards and forwards in my early 20s. And one thing really stuck with me out of many things. It's a brilliant book. I think your eclectic and intellectual mind would get a lot out of it if you haven't already. But he said that right there at the beginning of the 20th century, like right as evolution was really gaining its huge popularity,
Hmm.
one thing he noticed was that there was a lot of funding from the millionaires, and that it really stank of something that they're just trying to push out there, like right at its inception. How much more now? I mean, we see with all the vaccines and everything that they're just throwing it out there, or stolen elections or whatever. I mean, they're just throwing all. It's like, yeah, we're lying, and you want to join us? You want to be an archaeologist, and same thing with the space program and all of that. But I guess what I want to get to is, how do you tie all these things together? Because you're telling us stories that I've never heard, and I love cryptozoology. I love the
Me
subject of
too.
UFOs, and I don't know how we're going to cram all this into this one interview. Like, you're incredibly brilliant. How do you kind of tie all these dots together? Because we're seeing this happen before our eyes, and we need to get ready. I believe there's going to be an Antichrist kingdom very soon, and they'll use the UFOs and the cryptids
Yes.
and everything. You're doing a very important work, sir, and you're actually much
Yes,
more
you are.
pronounced than most researchers that we find out there. I mean, you don't know the kind of people that consider themselves researchers.
I very much do. I have, I have, I do. Well, okay, I'm down to only 3 shows a week. I assure you, I'm very aware.
People don't always appreciate that, especially with just the YouTube thumbnails and the cool, weird, catchy, clickbaity. This is real deep, heavy duty. So I really covet your big picture analysis of how this all kind of, and any stories that God shows you to share. I'm sure you have so many, and I I thought I knew most of them. You are sharing all stories I've never heard. So, but by all means, continue, sir. I didn't mean to interrupt that
Oh
much.
no, 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 no. I'm dude. I'm just a guy in an art desk. If I, I don't. The fact that I'm doing this work tells me something's really wrong with the way the church is going, because I should not be the one doing this. I should be drawing. I should be drawing comics. Like, that's what I should be doing. The fact that I'm having to be the one to talk about this shows me the church is fundamentally broken. There should be somebody who's
Yes.
fully funded doing this research. There should be a dozen scholars who've studied and gone to seminary and are fully funded to do this kind of research to bring this to the church, and there isn't, because the
Yeah.
church abdicated its authority a long time ago. This is why we're not going to see. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of dots here. Let me go back to why this is all important. The Bible is the true history of the world. Is it poetically written?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Was it designed? Was it written to a culture we're not a part of? Yes. Is it written for us? Yes. We have to understand the culture it was written in completely. I'm all about the nuance. Is it 6,000, 7,000 because we have a discrepancy between the Masoretic text and the Septuagint? Let's have that conversation. Is it older, or is it maybe 15,000? For me, that's all how, right? Those are conversations we can have that can be tested. That's the actual science of it, and let's have those conversations. My ultimate concern is why. If the fundamental question is it a truthful account of history? Yes. Okay, then that means the truth claims and its predictions about the future, which again is my other thing. I'm honestly way more in eschatology than I'm anything else. But it's like, if that's coming to pass, then that means everything in it matters.
Yeah.
That means the truth claims about Christ matter. That means the truth claims about humanity matter. You want to have a better world? You want to have a happier family? You want to have a society that isn't destroying itself? Jesus and the teachings of the Bible are the answer. The reason our culture has degenerated into what it is because as a culture, and it starts in the church, we do not fundamentally believe in the Bible. The Bible says we are created, we are endowed with, because we are made in the image of God. We are important. We have value. That is the word one. We don't fundamentally believe that, or we wouldn't have allowed slavery to have gone on the way it did in this country. That's
Right.
why that's why evolution took off, was because the slave owners loved it, because it said
That's
we're
right.
different. The slave Bible, they were desecrating the holy scriptures just because they didn't want an uprising. They didn't believe in the Bible, or they would have said, hold on, if we're going to have slavery, we should at least do it the way the Bible tells us, which is not what, which would not have allowed what we had here. They didn't believe it. If you believe the Bible, you'd say, whoa, 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 government, you don't have this authority. God is the supreme authority. We, as free people, as imagers of Christ, we have importance. We would stop that. We would say, children, you are important. We're not going to allow y'all to go just destroy your lives. But we stopped believing this over 150 years ago. Gesundheit. And that's why we've gotten here. And it started in the church. The church stopped making strong people. They wanted strong churches. They wanted political authority. They didn't see themselves as above the politics, which is where they're supposed to be. Their call was to make good people who would then go out into the world and make the world a better place. They said, well, let's use political power to make the world a better place. You can't dance with the devil. He doesn't change. He changes you. He changed the church system. That's why that's why all these churches are 501c3s. And guess what? If you're 501c3, the government can tell you what not to say.
That's
you
right.
can't say that Christ is the head of your church if somebody else can tell you what to say, because you won't say it, which means you've been sold out to mammon. I'm not saying that there aren't saved people in these churches. I'm not saying that Christ isn't there working the hearts and minds of people. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is the larger changes that you want to happen in society, these revivals, are not going to come from those churches. They can't, because Christ isn't over them. He is in the hearts and minds of people in there, yes, but he's not over the church as a body, because we sold out, because we don't actually believe the Bible when it says, I had a man, a deacon, an elder, ask me, do you think Paul was serious, was being literal when he said that there are powers and principalities over things, and that's what we really wrestle against? Yes, he was being serious. Why is this a question? You're a teacher. You have been teaching for decades. You've been helping guide this church for decades. What do you mean? Do I think it was literal? The Bible, it tells you it is.
Yes.
That's the entire point. How can you not understand that this is a spiritual warfare? It's not a metaphor. These things are real. They oversee. We have Michael Heiser is the most important theologian of the last 100 years, because what he's done is he's shown us the worldview we threw away because the church stopped believing in the Bible. There are spirits over nations because Christ hasn't come yet. That's right. Michael Heiser is the most important theologian of the last 100 years. I mean, I don't care anyone else.
Yes.
Read his work first. The Bible will reopen. But this is the point. These things are real. They interact with us on a daily basis in ways most people aren't. 100 years ago, people told people how to behave. They said, look, there are things in the woods. If you hear someone calling your name in the woods, you don't go into the woods because there's a supernatural being there trying to kill you. Why
Wendigo.
Well, give it whatever name you want.
Is.
Shahadim, elves, fairies, Wendigo, Chupacabra, whatever you name you, it doesn't matter. It's the same fundamental thing. It is the demons that are waiting to consume you, to kill you, because that's what they want, our destruction. But we don't even talk about that anymore. How many people have texts on one of the shows that I do? He had a great line. It was sudden acute demonic possession. How many people go and commit crimes and they're like normal people, then they've stabbed somebody 37 times. They're like, what happened? They said, I don't know. 1 minute everything's fine. The next minute I know I'm stabbing this guy and I feel like I'm outside of my own body watching it happen. Well, because
they blacked out.
Yeah. I have talked to cops and homicide detectives. They've all said, I've heard the story over and 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 over again. Why? Because these things are real and we don't protect ourselves against them. How many Christians do the simple things that they used to teach to protect themselves and their families from these spirits? We don't.
Yes.
And so these families are suffering. How, again, the simple fact of the matter is we as a Bible believing body stop believing the Bible. How are we supposed to change the world when we don't even understand the world that we're in, much less the power in changing it? How are we supposed to protect ourselves when we don't even think the danger is there? I've had people tell me to my face, I don't want to think about these things because they scare me. You want to go in the woods and not know that the bear is there? What? I don't know how to help you. I'm out. Okay. I don't know how, like, I'm going to, like, hey, don't go down that dark alley with the gangbangers in it with money pouring out of your pockets because they may hurt you. I don't want to think about that. And then you're surprised when
it's a good analogy.
And then you're surprised when you get when your family ends up like the Waynes at the beginning of every Batman movie. I can't help you here if you don't want to know the world you're living in. I can't save you. I can't help you. But the entire church over the last 150 years said, here, religion that is worshiping materialism, you get to define reality. Bible, you don't know what you're talking about. These things aren't real because the people who believe the universe magically blew up spontaneously for no reason 14 billion years ago on a Tuesday, and we have everything now. They told us these things don't exist.
Right.
Okay, I that sounds insane to me, but I'm the guy looking for living pterosaurs and Bigfoots. What the heck do I know?
So Jason, let me. Oops.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Carolyn, that's okay.
Sorry, Michael. This is a burning question I had. So Jason, I really liked that notion in your book about how the UFOs are the religion of the Antichrist.
Yes.
That when a UFO hovers over the White House or over a larger city or what have you, when disclosure finally happens, and then the unbeliever friend turns to the believer, could be you and me, that which it's such that we didn't tell them about this, and says to Joe Christian or Jane Christian, oh, well, you being a Christian didn't tell me about UFOs and aliens. So the aliens are telling me that they are my progenitors, that they created us. And so therefore the Bible isn't true. And so that scenario is something that we want to obliterate. We want to have every Christian be in the know, to take our head out of the sand like spiritual ostriches, and say, hey, look, people, that the ancient alien paradigm is being pushed through the media, and they're coming up with soft disclosure, then hard disclosure, that there are aliens, and that not only are there aliens, but they are creators. So instead of having that type of conversation, we want to have the type of conversation, should we be here, should the Lord tarry, and these aliens do arrive in a spaceship or in a craft, where the friend would say to Joe or Jane Christian, who is red pilled, hey, look, you warned me about this, about that the aliens are going to show up and say that they're our creators, but I know that you told me that they're not our creators, but God, Yahweh Jesus, is my creator. That's the conversation that we hope to proliferate, not the former. So that was the best line. That was the best notion out of the whole entire book. So I wanted to kind of to talk about that. So people are going to be listening to this, and I'm going to label the podcast how UFOs and Bigfoot confirm the Bible. So then the big question in the listener's mind is, how do those creatures confirm the Bible? So we talked about the timeline, we talked about the agenda, that's the lying agenda that's being pushed. So that the big question that they want answered is how do aliens and UFOs and Bigfoot confirm the Lord and confirm the Bible?
So the easiest way to, again, start at the beginning is the beginning. Bigfoot is just a stand-in for cryptozoology. So that's the beginning of the book, right? That there was a perfect beginning. It ended in a cataclysmic flood. This is where we get the fossils, and that all of these creatures that supposedly died off tens of millions of years ago that are still around are evidence of that flood, that we don't have millions of years. We're talking about thousands. So that's that. So that begins the story. There's also something that happens at the beginning of the story. That's the Nephilim. That is the Watchers coming down, creating these hybrid beings. They are worshipped. They become our gods. It's one of the reasons the flood occurs. Jesus told us it would be like the days of Noah at the time of his coming, which would mean we would expect to have a return of these gods, right? A return of these Nephilim. And that's what we're seeing. We are seeing these UFOs come down. They are impregnating women. They are creating they specifically say they're creating a hybrid species to help us, and that they are going to rule us. That's all part of this narrative, right? They want to help us become, there are space brothers, right? That's the same story we're seeing in Genesis 6. It's the exact same story. Now, where if you were to sit Giorgio Tsoukalos, the aliens guy from Ancient Aliens, if you were to sit me and him at a table, we would agree 100% on the following sentence: the UFOs and their pilots today are the gods and angels and demons of the ancient world. Mm-hmm. We would agree 100% on that account. Now, let me put one quick caveat on there. The United States government uses the UFO phenomena to hide their, I think there's probably a much larger portion of the UFO phenomena and even the abduction phenomena that is the United States government. I can't tell you what percentage of that pie it is, but it's a big one. But there is clearly a phenomena that's not the United States government, right? It's clearly something else entirely. So I would say, again, Giorgio Tsoukalos and I were having tea. We're eating chips and queso because we're clearly going to be in Texas. We would agree on that sentence, right? The angels and demons of yesterday are the aliens of today. Great. The point of disagreement is he would say they were wrong thousands of years ago because they were always aliens from another planet. I would say we're wrong today because they were always these supernatural beings that we were right about the first time. That's the point of disagreement. It isn't the phenomena. It isn't that these two phenomena are connected. It's what the phenomena is. I would simply look at it and say, okay, here's the problem. If these are creatures from another planet, Mork from Ork is coming down from Krypton, then there should be yeah, exactly. Then there should be some behaviors that I shouldn't be seeing, right? They shouldn't disappear at the name of Christ. They should not be able to be driven out because people are using traditional Christian exorcism techniques. I should not have other associated phenomena like shadow people and poltergeist activity, and on and on and on the list goes. I'm a big fan. I have this saying: all things are pie, preferably pumpkin, right? So everything's a pie chart for me. But tied into a pie chart is a Venn diagram, right? It's just a bunch of pies that get closer together. I don't mind two phenomena having some overlap here and there, right? There's lots of overlaps between wolves and deer, two completely different species. One's the predator, one's the prey, but there's a lot of overlap in their natural environment, what they eat, where they go, where they drink. So yeah, any phenomenon is going to have some overlapping points. My problem is I have the demon in the paranormal diagram over here, the little pie, and then I've got the UFO pie. My problem is they're the same friggin' pie. The only difference is what they look like, right? If I've got a story of a woman who has a textbook abduction account, or she doesn't remember, it's the time loss, but the things that took her were giant birdmen that she saw dancing on top of a water cistern in Texas. If I've got a pair of kids who have a textbook missing time encounter, but the things that takes them is a literal demon that reaches through a wall. And then I have a typical UFO abduction, and what we have are gray aliens. I got a problem here. Everything's identical, except the things taking them. Either aliens and bird people and demons all like to do the same thing, or we don't see these manifestations are themselves lies. And that it's a different phenomena that's doing this thing. And it would be one thing if it was me saying it. It's another thing when John Keel, not a Christian, is saying, hey, this stuff, these UFOs, these aliens are not what they're saying. When the guy, Whitley Strieber, the guy who writes the book Communion, is saying, these are not what they are. All of the initial UFO investigators said, whatever these things are, they are not what they're telling us that they are. It is a deception. They're the ones saying it. I don't even have to say it. And I go back to, as the tiebreaker for me, Aleister Crowley himself, the man who literally brought back the Enochian magics in the Western world for the 20th century. He himself said, today we call them angels and demons. Tomorrow we will call them something else. The demon that taught him the old Enochian ways was called Lamb. He was a demon that he summoned. The people who follow Aleister Crowley's religion today will publicly tell you Lamb was not a demon. He was one of a race of telepathic aliens that they still commune with today. So I go back to, here's the problem. I see too much overlap. This Venn diagram is basically the same friggin' pumpkin pie. As far as I'm concerned, then you have no evidence. Someone asked me, what would it take for you to believe that these aliens came from another planet, they weren't demons? I said they would have to radically alter everything about everything we know about them. Every actual account, not what they tell people, the people who actually encounter these creatures. And it's like, this is what I saw. This is what's happened to me. This is all the associated phenomena. If the problem is in this whole thing, the biggest problem is people look at, they say, well, this is what people say people see. And they take that as true. I want to know, what do people actually encounter? Once you get rid of what people say people see into just what do people see, you find reality starts making a lot more sense. And when you realize that these things lie to you, it's like, oh, you're not some 3-foot tall, bald alien creature. You're a friggin' demon. That's why you have all of this paranormal stuff happening around you. That's why when I tell people, okay, play gospel music when you go to sleep tonight, do that. And all of a sudden everything stops. Well, what do you, I'm sorry, you think the Martians from Klendathu are have a problem with gospel music? They can travel millions of light years, but they're like, whoa, they're pumping some I don't even know who the bands are.
Praise and worship.
Yeah, they're pumping some praise and worship. I can't be there. What does that tell you?
That they're
just like in the last Star Trek, all you got to do to beat the aliens is just, in your Enterprise, just blast gospel music while you're plowing through all the UFOs. And
yeah,
I love that scene, by the way. I'm also a nerd, but I think there's a lot of stuff out there that doesn't fit the paradigm of only they're all demons and then stop there. Like I mean, my mother-in-law has met a good pixie. Howard Storm, who we interviewed, was shown by Jesus when he was resurrected he was saved from hell and went to heaven and asked Jesus about the alien thing. This is his testimony, not mine, but that there was a lot of beings in the universe that even the Lord would visit and interact with. I'm curious, and I speak this just out of free will and man to man with Jerry, not a man, but what do you think about all of
thankfully
just kidding, age, you gotta verify everything. It's just the world is so crazy now, it's so insane. I know. And I really covet your vise, your window kind of wise telescope of this whole thing. I mean, what are we dealing with here? As far as it's spiritual warfare, but
yes,
there is so much out there. And I'm interested in any other testimonies that you have as well, because you speak this. It's like, what are people actually encountering? And sometimes you have a scale, like somebody thought they saw something and they're reporting that. Sometimes you see actual evidence. I myself, I am not in the occult. I'm a Christian. I come from a spiritual warfare family. My grandfather was Don Basham, who worked with Derek Prince. My uncle runs Derek Prince Ministries. I'm not into, and I was in Hawaii in a hot tub late at night. It would always happen around 2 a.m. And there was just this little, very faint dot that would just blink irregularly, but it stayed in the same spot. I mean, it could have been a satellite, except it was staying in the same spot for at least 20 minutes every night. In the Big Island, in the volcano, of course, where there's no lights, bunch of crazy hillbilly Hawaiians out there. I don't know what we were doing out there. It was COVID lockdowns. I was looking at this thing. It's like, I know all of this, but now I'm seeing it and I have no idea what to do with this knowledge. This is literally a UFO.
Okay.
What is that?
Okay. So this is great. Because I would argue my earlier rant, I mentioned we gave up reality to the atheists a long time ago. When we did that, we gave up a broader understanding of the supernatural world. Going back to visit Michael Heiser for a brief moment, the word Elohim, right? We often, when we see it, it's often translated as God, right? Or gods. And it's not an incorrect understanding. It's not an incorrect word. It's not an incorrect translation. The problem is what we think of when we see the word God, right? That the bigger problem we have is that's why when we see gods show up in the Old Testament, we think, oh, is this a pantheon? Is this a better understanding would be because when Samuel is called up, his spirit is called an Elohim. So the question becomes, what's going on here?
Wow.
A better understanding of the word Elohim. Again, there is the Elohim, there is the God, right? There is the creator of the universe. He is species specific. But then we have everything that is not us is like him in that way, right? The sons of God, the angels. The problem is we dumbed down our understanding of the supernatural world to mean angels, demons, and that's it. And we don't even understand what a demon is half the time, right? We dumb down our understanding. I would argue the American Indians, the Cherokee specifically, have a better understanding of the supernatural world. They call them just the spirits, right? And then you have the Great Spirit, and then you have these spirits underneath. The supernatural world is the world of the Elohim is a full ecosystem of supernatural beings, good and bad. And the thing is, we don't see that. We don't understand that. We dumbed it down. We think that that's just over there. It's a supernatural thing. It doesn't affect us at all. These creatures have jobs. The ones that aren't locked up, they do their job, whether they're good or bad. They still have things to do. That's why that story in Kings where the spirit's like, I'll go be a lying spirit to the king, right? We don't know what to do with that, with our modern theology. Well, it's like the ancient Israelites didn't have a problem with it. Why? Because they had a better understanding of the supernatural world. We're like, well, we're the smarter ones. We've got computers, and cars, and cell phones, and Nick at Night, and I can order a pizza. Clearly, I'm superior. No, idiot. You threw away technology hundreds of years ago. The supernatural world is a universe, an ecosystem of creatures that we can't understand. Differing authorities, differing roles, differing powers, some good, some bad.
Jason, you mentioned the giant bird people. I pay attention a lot to my dreams because sometimes they come true and the Bible tells us to.
Uh-oh.
I had a dream of a giant birdman that came up to me and shook my hand, and I was like not sure what to do with it, but my curiosity overcame my fear. Next thing I know, I'm in Taipei, Taiwan, which I know very well, and I speak Chinese, and I'm literally like teleported there, I think, by the bird guy. And I'm actually escorting a pastor and his wife throughout Taiwan, throughout Taipei, and such a random dream, but it was like this very, I guess, because God knows I love the supernatural, the kind of paranormal side of the supernatural, that I can handle that. Like I have chickens, I love birds. I just think they're so interesting and weird, and
They
so many
are.
different kinds of them. And I wonder if there aren't some of these giant birdmen working for God. I mean, like
Yeah.
big bird size, like,
Oh,
like
yeah.
really big.
No, they are. I mean, that's the thing. The supernatural world is full of creatures that we would not recognize. And here's the
Right.
thing. It doesn't mean that that's what the creature actually looks like. It just means it's how your mind could comprehend him. That's what it wanted. That the entire supernatural world is full of these creatures, good and bad, that do their job. Just because something's good doesn't mean it's our friend. It just means it's going to do it's going to do the right thing. They've got a role they're just doing what God has asked them to do. They're on God's side. Then there are those that are evil, but they're still going to do their job. They may not like you specifically. They're like, no, I want your destruction, but I'm also not going to not do my job because I don't want to be locked up in Tartarus with the Watchers, right? I got a job to
Right.
do. I'm going to do it, and that's going to keep me out of it, but I'm still going to try and trick you to do something evil, right?
Mhm.
The problem is we threw away good theology. When
Yes.
people talk about Jinn, or they talk about the Shahadim, or they talk about the Fae, they talk about the Leshy, they talk what on and on, the spirits. It's just the fact that it is a spiritual world full of a lot of things. Now, do we fully understand that world? No, we don't. We can't. We live on this side of the veil. Let me throw one other wrench in this whole thing. So we have the supernatural. Some of the supernatural can become physical. There's no reason to think it can't. We know it can. We know magic is a real thing, and some of that gets really screwy pretty quick. But you're God. You've got a bunch of angelic beings that rebel against you. Okay. Do you let them keep the company car? No, you don't. Why would you let your enemies keep the weapons you gave them? We all have this idea that angels fly because they have wings. That's nowhere in scripture. There's only a couple beings described as having wings. We have several accounts of them in some kind of vehicle. That does, we see that is strange, but it's like, why? We have vehicles. Why wouldn't these angels? Right? If you're God, do you let your enemies keep the weapons in cars, that in vehicles, whatever, that you gave them? Of course not. You take that back. You're like, you don't want to work for me? Fine. I'm not going to give you the supplies. How do they compensate? Where do they rest? They're going to make their own stuff. They're going to build their own things. So I think there's a very physical, and by the way, if you're going to go around and make new Nephilim, you're going to make new hybrids to do your work so that you don't have to worry about being cast out or having an angel run interference because you're doing something you shouldn't. That's what a Nephilim is. It is a fifth columnist. It's a material being that can do what they can't. They don't cause that kind of problem. So if you're going to create, so they've got to get around now. Why wouldn't you build spaceships for them? Or, you go back further. Why wouldn't you build blimps for them? Why wouldn't you build things that you can get around in? Why wouldn't you build way stations on planets or moons deep in our solar system so that you're away from prying eyes? So that you don't have to worry about some local angel who's doing his job. Why wouldn't you do that? And again, the universe is massive. I have no doubt that there's beings out there that God said, okay, here, juggle these planets for eternity or whatever. I mean, we don't know. That's not my role. That's not my concern. The problem is we've set ourselves up to fail because we don't even try to understand this spiritual world with even 30 seconds of thought. We'd say angels,
Right.
demons, and we're out.
Very,
Right,
very
right.
well said.
Jason, what do you think the parentage of Gigantopithecus or Bigfoot is? Who do you think his parents are? Or do you think do you think Bigfoot's parentage is fallen angels plus human women? Or do you think that they're a genetic anomaly that the Watchers / fallen angels created? Did they splice the human and a monkey together, or is it just a big monkey? What do you think the origin of Bigfoot is?
You know what? I'm actually indifferent as to their origin specifically because until we have one, my concern is it physical or is it paranormal? And I think the bigger problem for me is there is reason to think that there is a physical creature walking around, right? Now, from what we see, I think it's probably nothing more than a large ape. I don't see a lot to say Nephilim, but I can't say it's not, right? I don't have the evidence to say whether it's Nephilim or not. The Melvin Ketchum DNA study, which has some issues, there's a lot of weird stuff around that whole scenario. Don't want to get into it. Indicates it could be a Nephilim, right? But the physical Bigfoot, they have what's called a mid-tarsal break. Okay, if you see a true Bigfoot track, there's one, their foot is superficially like ours, but their heel is further back and their ankle is further forward because of their weight. And when they step down, their foot has this weird indentation in the middle of it, and it's this hyper flexibility. And what happens is as the foot goes down, it does this like our hand, and it bends up like that and pushes down because of their weight. That indicates to me that that's not a human. And plus they have 5 fingers, they have 5 toes traditionally. We don't see a lot of the weird anomalies that you see with Nephilim, right? They, and really, if you look at like the patty footage, the proportion, like just a giant chimpanzee. So right now, my working theory is there is a physical Bigfoot out there, species of Bigfoot. I think it's a very, very small, highly mobile, very intelligent population, right? But they're still ape. I can't say for definitively that it's not Nephilim, but it isn't consistent. The thing though is, until we can capture one again, poke it with a stick, draw its blood, we can't say what it is. So I'm indifferent. Whatever it is, it is.
Do you believe in those recordings? Don't forget where you are, bookmark
Yeah,
it. But
yeah.
those famous recordings of like half pig, half dog, half deranged psychopath. I won't do the imitation right now because it's too nasty, but I can't do it.
Thank you.
What do you think about those recordings that Ellie Marzulli put out?
So this is where things get interesting, right? Because again, it's until we know what something is, we can't say what it isn't. And I think the bigger point is there's a whole world of these supernatural beings that are trying to masquerade as these cryptozoological creatures, right? Things that we would have called Shahadim or Leshy 1,000 years ago want us to think they're Bigfoot. They want us to think they're Gugway or whatever, or a dog man. They want us to think they're a natural creature so we don't recognize them for what they are, which is a supernatural being. And this is one of the things that really bugs me. And it is, where is the line between research and worship? Because what do you do when there's a Bigfoot sighting? A bunch of people run out there and they start walking around. They're researching and they buy little dolls and they buy these things and they get wound up in it. They get captured. And so many of these encounters happen around Indian burial mounds or graveyards or bridges that have become havens for the occult. It seems to me that what is Bigfoot? I can honestly say I just don't know. I'm here to find out what it is so we can figure out, okay, boom, here's your category. So that we can also say, well, but then what isn't Bigfoot? Because there's a lot of people running around that are getting into these things. And I've got a real question as to what it is they're talking, because a lot of people talk to Bigfoot. There's mind speak. And they're saying, oh, but like, how do you know it's Bigfoot? Well, it told me that it was Bigfoot. And you believe it? Just out of curiosity? Story after story, people saying these things followed them home 80 miles while they were driving. It followed them into the city. You wake up, you're in your bedroom, and there's an 8-foot tall, dark, shadowy humanoid figure with red glowing eyes. It's a demon or a shadow person or whatever. But you wake up, you unzip your tent, and there's a giant humanoid, dark, shadowy figure with red glowing eyes. Oh, it's Bigfoot. Again, I think probably, if I, again, gun to my head, I think Bigfoot is an ape. I think it's a large, apes are highly intelligent, but they're apes that just want to be left alone, like most apes do. Most apes don't want to hang out with us, right? They're like, y'all are nuts. I just want to eat my deer or my pig or whatever and be alone. I want to, that's what they do. That's why we have all these footprints of small foot, from juveniles and big footprints and middle footprints, and they jump out of trees every once in a while because you cheesed them off because you drove away the pig that they were looking for, right? We have these encounters and these stories. Then you got the ones where they're like, hey, it followed me home and it was knocking on my window, but I came across it 80 miles away, or it's talking to me, or it's there every time I go out to this old Indian burial ground. It shows up and I can see it and I can hear it moving around me. It's there every time. I see its eyes glowing. Okay, my friend, I would happily suggest that's not Bigfoot. Or I've got Bigfoot on my property. It's there all the time, and sometimes it has horns. My friend, perhaps that's not Bigfoot that you're dealing with, right? And that's, again, what any one thing is irrelevant to me. I just want to know what it is, put it on the chalkboard, move on. If we waved a wand tomorrow and it's like, here's what every cryptid is, and here's what every UFO, if we knew absolutely everything tomorrow, great, I'm moving on. I don't have, my job hasn't changed.
Right.
My job is to proclaim the glory of God and to call people to believe the Bible so they can change their lives and get closer to the man and the being that wrote it, God himself, because that's what he wants from us, is a relationship. He
That's
wants
right.
us to be with him. That's the only thing that matters. I don't care what these things are, but I think these things are evidence. The thing that wrote the Bible is telling us, hey, this is the world you actually live in, not what the world is telling you, not what CNN tells you, not what these science textbooks that are actually just religion masquerading as science are telling you. What matters is the book written by God is telling you what the world is, so you can have a relationship with him. Because let's maybe all of us are crazy and I didn't see an actual pterosaur and it was something else going on and there's some sort of weird psyche thing. Okay, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't change my opinion on anything. Great. Now I know what it is. Right? All that matters to me is that we look at the world with an honest pair of eyes, because if we do that, we realize the Bible is telling us the world we actually live in, who we are, and who he is. And that's the only thing that matters. So when people are like, well, what is Bigfoot? Well, there's a physical Bigfoot running around. It's probably an ape. Could be Nephilim. I can't say it's not, but it's probably just an ape. The bigger problem is what are these things running around claiming to be Bigfoot? That's my other problem. Because what are you people encountering? Why is it pushing this Bigfoot agenda? Because I go back to the C.S. Lewis's materialist witch. We want a material explanation for things that are clearly supernatural. That's what we want. That's what makes them happy. So that when people are facing these demons at the end of the world, right? And I use that the demon metaphorically only to mean the whole species of evil that's going to be in. Some of them are going to be in humans. Some are going to look like humans. Some are going to have their own physical bodies, right? Some are going to be just supernatural beings appearing as things. When we encounter them, we have to know what we're dealing with. So many people are not prepared for that. Some of them are going to masquerade as Bigfoot and Dogman and Chupacabra. Some of them are going to pretend to be aliens. Some are going to pretend to be angels. Some are going to pretend to be politicians. We have to know what they are. And we have to be able to work within this world. Because right now what we have is a modern church that is weak. They're willing to give up everything about the claims of the Bible. Well, if you don't believe the Bible's an inherently supernatural book, if you don't believe that God created the universe, well, not the way it's described. I think maybe it's metaphorical. Fine, whatever. But you don't think that there was a worldwide flood. You don't think there was Noah. You don't think there was an actual Adam and Eve. You gave all that up. And then, well, the supernatural stuff, that's all metaphor. Then you don't actually believe the Bible, do you? Are you actually a Christian if you don't believe in the supernatural?
Right.
That's my question, right? So what is Bigfoot? Again, gun to head, probably an ape, giant ape. Do they show up in the scripture? There's people who think that they do. The sons of fools that show up in Job, they bray like donkeys. They live in dry riverbeds. They eat the mallow plants. That sounds very Bigfoot like. And these things have been around forever. People, I would argue that they're the troll or the ogres of European mythology, right?
Good point.
They're the hairy man of they're the stick Indians of the Caddo, the hairy man of the Algonquin, like on and on and on. These things they're the Yeren in China. People see these things all the time. They're clearly there, but it's just, again, dragons were real. They are still real because these are the evidences of the flood. But there are things out there that are stranger. There is evidence of giants because they were real. Because these things, and the reason that our world hates and poo-poos these things and tries to drive them out is because if the world is full of giants and dragons and paranormal creatures that shapeshift, and then at a certain point people will be like, well, maybe this whole Bible thing has something to it. And that's the thing the world doesn't want us to think. That's the thing they don't want normal people to think it, but more importantly, they don't want us Christians to think it. The most dangerous thing in the world to these things of the world is a church that actually believes the Bible.
That's right. Absolutely. This is something I thought of as you were talking, Jason, is that in as Michael and you and I know that the Chinese zodiac has 11 animals
Yes.
that are real, but
Hmm.
the 12th one is the dragon that most people think is unreal, is imaginary. As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, I used to be a trivia DJ with a company, and one of the the questions that my boss had me ask the audience was, "What is the only animal in the Chinese zodiac that is imaginary?" And the answer was supposedly the dragon, and I cringed when I read that question because in my heart I'm thinking, no, dude, even though he's a great guy that had created the questions, that was his
Hmm.
paradigm. That is the majority paradigm where they believe that dragons aren't real. And as a matter of
Yeah.
fact, there was a guy, I forget what his name is, but I think believe in the 1800s, he came up with the term quote unquote dinosaur.
Yeah.
And around that time is when they decided to elongate the timeline of history from the biblical timeline of anywhere from 8 to 15,000 years to millions and billions of years and evolution, because Satan knows that if he and I know that there's going to be some very old earth Christian creationists who are probably cringing right now, but this is us three believe in a younger earth, a younger universe, and what have you. But I mean, the universe could be billions of years old, but in terms of the earth, I believe
Hmm.
that the earth is around 8 to 15,000 years old. I believe in the biblical timeline. I'm sorry, I just do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I refer to Ken Ham, this Christian Research Institute. I'm sorry, pardon me, not the Christian. They might be old Earth creationists, so that's okay. I still follow them. But who's what is so anyway? Ken Ham's
Yeah.
institute, where
I
he
couldn't
has
tell you off the top of my head. Yeah, I'm
the
I'm
Christian
terrible with
Science.
names. I'm lucky to remember my own.
Right. He has
I'm Michael, by the
the
way.
Hi,
Michael
Michael.
Basham.
Well, see, we all had
I'm
these little name
Sherilyn.
tags on our thing, so
Oh
I'm like,
yes,
I know.
Michael, Sherilyn. Yeah.
right.
Jason, your
I'm
website
Sherilyn
is just
Michael.
for the confirmation for the web for the
Yes.
internet. SIRUpapers.com.
Correct. Hmm.
Just double checking.
Yeah,
Sorry
it's
to
got
cut you
link.
off,
Oh
Jerry.
no, no. Yeah, it's got a link to all my books, all my websites, or all the shows that I'm on, things like that.
I lost my train of thought. Can somebody help me to put the train back
Okay.
on the
I think I know.
rails
I
What
think I
you
know
were
where you're
trying to
going. Yeah.
say was Jason has very much more to share, but we've got to kind of boil this down into like
Right.
Yes.
what I feel like what you're bringing some really important points that I've never thought about before because I kind of lump things like Bigfoot, okay, somewhat physical, somewhat paranormal, spiritual,
Hmm.
okay, boom. But you're bringing this into a higher level, like really emphasizing theological standpoint, which I'm a big fan of Michael Heiser. He's actually on the network, Fringe Radio Network, which we're on right now. So, um, you're bringing things into the Bible strictly, and you're quoting verses from Job, which I didn't even ever read. I've never seen anybody make that connection. So thank you very much.
Oh, I didn't make that connection. That was actually Dr. Baugh. He mentioned it. Like I said, I'm agnostic on that particular point. Like, there's a lot to
Okay.
go for that, but my broader point on again, I don't want to interrupt. Just saying that's not my point. In this, I did not make that connection myself. I was like,
Fine.
okay, let me look at it. I'm like, you know what? If you want to make that connection, I certainly won't stop you. It's not a bad connection to make.
Well, with regards, absolutely, and with regards to what Jillian was saying, like the whole evolution, the term dinosaur, and then we had
Yeah.
out of nowhere Michael Crichton. The '80s was a big year or a
Oh yeah.
big decade in '90s for dinosaurs. I
Hmm.
was born in '83 and obsessed with them. And then when I heard Spielberg was making a movie, it was like my whole world
Oh
changed.
yeah. Hmm.
And it was such a great movie, and it's such a great book. I read it 10 times as a 10-year-old, Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, who
Yes.
really amazing man. But now it's kind of fading off. Maybe they're losing the funding. Not as many people want to go watch a movie about giant chickens, which that's all they look like to me is like they're basically just chickens. Because
Yeah.
I know I have chick. Um, maybe it's time for these extra dimensional beings and the true history to just come in and like
Hmm.
the veneer of evolution is fading. They've lost the funding, first of all, kind of like COVID. And now it's like the masks are coming off and we're going to actually engage this. And
Yeah,
like you were saying, there is no church prepared for it. How do we get prepared? You are one of the whistleblowing watchmen. We need more of you. If you have a cloning machine, please use it. But because I mean, Michael Heiser has pretty bad cancer. He's still
I know.
fighting, but sometimes he has somebody else, do the
Hmm.
show, Naked Bible. I believe we're almost there. What do
Oh,
you?
we
How
are.
does this all and why? And we're all interested in the paranormal. You're saying you're interested in eschatology. Why focus on Bigfoot UFOs, these things? What do you feel like the significance of that is with regards to we're about to encounter the Antichrist system?
Gotcha. Okay, I can actually hurt the Chinese dragon and eschatology. I can make this work. Okay. Ironically, on Wednesday, I've moved my Serial Papers show and my Jason McLean Questions Everything show to Wednesdays on the Texas Front Porch YouTube channel. It's TEX' Front Porch, or you can just go to Serial Papers. That's all there. And I do have the Serial Papers YouTube channel as well. Links are all at serialpapers.com. We actually did a thing on the Chinese dragon specifically, on the material physical dragons, right? Because I did theological dragons and I did physical dragons, because there's two different types in mythology, and there's the theological dragons that talk to you and they do things that become gods, which really, if you look at the like the Eastern and Mesoamerican traditions that use these theological dragons, they're basically just stand-ins for the watchers, right? Then there's these stories of physical dragons, like the story I told you about the dragon of Rhodes, right, where they're just creatures that get killed or eat people or whatever. The Chinese dragon has been around literally as old as China is. One of the earliest, it was a late or middle Bronze Age burial. This person, the remains was flanked with these shells that were arranged as animals. One was like a bull, the other one was a Chinese dragon. That's one of the earliest versions of the Chinese dragon. Compare that with a picture of the Megalania, something I mentioned earlier, right? A Komodo dragon, essentially the size of a bus, and they're one for one. What we have to understand is a lot of dragons, right? The artists that were rendering them in the Middle Ages and later, and even earlier than that, they didn't actually see these things, right? The artists themselves didn't see them. They're being told these stories. And so they're rendering them the best that they can with what they have from their understanding of the world. So these dragons are, to her point, yes, the word dinosaur didn't exist until like the 1860s. Before, they were called dragons. And we do that to distance ourselves in a lot of ways, right? Because again, if we live in a world of giants and dragons, evolution's got some splaining to do. To our friends who are old Earth creationists, I would ask the question, why do you believe the Earth is old? Again, not what people say is seen, but what people actually see. You said that you look at dinosaurs, you see them as giant chickens now. Yes, because they are. You know how we know they're giant chickens? Because we were able to take hemoglobin from a Tyrannosaurus Rex bone and test it against antigens from chickens, and they responded, meaning they are similar species. So let's ask this question. How in the world does hemoglobin stay valid for 65 plus million years? If you were to take hemoglobin or any soft tissue
That's right.
and put them in a perfect, hermetically sealed case, in perfect, stable, air-conditioned situation, the most you could possibly ever hope to get out of that is a million years. These are perfect environments, a million years. And then after that, it's going to turn to dust.
Is
So you're
that the
telling
famous T-Rex hamburger video that's like actual like red flesh of a T-Rex bone that was
Um,
released?
I
It
can't
was like seven
recall if
years
it's
ago.
this. Yeah, I can't recall if it's the same one. But the problem is, it's not just that one video. It's people have been finding soft tissue, and people. One guy used to cut up bones to make dinosaur bones to make necklaces and things for years. He said everyone he cut into smelled like sulfur, like they were rotting eggs.
So
Wow.
are you guys following this? Like this is kind of significant. If you're, you mean dinosaur bones with
Yes.
still the flesh on them? Like,
Oh, we have
dude,
we have unfossilized dinosaur bones. We've got, again, soft tissue. The simple fact of the matter is, why do people think the Earth is old? Look at the London hammer. I have a copy right here, made by Joe Taylor. You can go see the real thing at the Creation Evidence Museum.
Wow.
This is a hammer. It is a hammer. It's made out of an iron that will not rust because the chlorine has bonded to it. If you know anything about chemistry, you know that chlorine and iron are very reactive. I'm sorry, if it was the History Channel, I'd call it iron. But it's highly reactive. You can bond chlorine to iron, or iron, if that's how you want to pronounce it. The thing is, it turns into a solvent. It turns into a liquid, basically. So I've asked metallurgists, because I have a thing coming out. It's the Creation Evidence Museum in a box. I just can't, it's going to be debuting over at Joe Taylor's Mount Blanco Museum in the near future. I asked metallurgists about this. I said, how do you get chlorine to bond to iron in a way that makes it not rust? They said it would be possible. They don't know how. I called metallurgists and people. I didn't realize that there is a specialty in corrosion. I called corrosion specialists, and they're like, I don't know how you do that, but you can, theoretically. This was found in London, Texas. The rock it's supposed to be in is supposed to be hundreds of millions of years old, because we found in with it seashells, clamshells, fossilized. Again, lots of detail. I could talk for 30 minutes on just this one find. We have the Delk print.
Well, I was going to say that particular design of hammer, I'd say that was one of them 100 million-year-old came out in
exactly.
Particularly, 100 million and 34.
Precisely.
AD, that was
precisely. It was very
That's
popular
great.
at the time, and the Raptors loved them. The Delk print, which is literally a human footprint that has happened over a theropod footprint. People say, oh, it was faked. Well, how did they fake? Because they did a CGI, or not CGI, they did a CAT scan to see the compression layers. The human footprint has compression layers, meaning it was a real footprint made before the rock was formed. We have all kinds of evidence like this. To my old Earth friends, you're still Christians. I would just ask, why are you giving up the biblical dates or the biblical ages of the earth? Why? There's no good reason for it. Because imagine I came to you and I said, we're walking on a path and we find a bunch of rocks, right? All arranged like a triangle, perfectly smooth, perfectly round stones. And there's 6 of them arranged in a perfect triangle. And on each one had 5 dots in a perfect circle. And we said, well, we need to figure out how this happened. Groovy. But I tell you, the only thing we cannot possibly consider is human creation. Humans made this. You'd look at me and say I was a complete idiot. Because not only do we have, again, perfect symmetry as a triangle, we have perfectly smooth and perfectly round spheres. There's information on them. Those 5 dots show the 5 different triangles you can make with that pattern. That is clearly man-made. I said, nope, we can't consider it. The religion that calls itself science considers everything but creation, and therefore it throws out that which calls it into question. If we have popular, again, I'm not the one saying this. The science is saying that we have dinosaur hemoglobin and soft tissue. By the way, they also have carbon-14 in them, as does coal, and that shouldn't be there if it's hundreds of millions of years old. So do diamonds. The simple fact of the matter is their story isn't adding up. Why do we have people within less 3,000 years seeing megalania? Why am I seeing a pterosaur? Why are people seeing this thing that we call Mokele Mbembe that looks, to their accounts, like a large sauropod? Why are we seeing these creatures? Well, because the Earth isn't old. Now, how does that prepare us for what's coming?
Right.
How does that prepare us for what's coming? Because that's really the question. Simple. Is the Bible true about where we came from? Yes. Great. And that tells us how to live our lives with Christ and why that's important. So what's coming up at the end? The end of the world. Literally, the book of Revelation is happening in a lot of, and again, I have a whole book. I think we read that wrong as far as how the order of things, but that's an entire episode into itself. The simple fact of the matter is these things are going to come. These things that we called Nephilim are returning. The Watchers are returning. They're coming to Earth. It says that Satan and his angels will be cast to Earth. They're going to interact with us. We have an Antichrist coming. If the Bible is telling us this is what's happening, we need to be prepared for it. We need to know the lie is coming. In fact, I'll take it one step further. I said it's the middle of the book that's important to me. Jesus told us an age of deception was coming. We're in it right now. When you say, why has the world gone completely insane? Why are people believing these insane ideas? It's because the deception is in the world. Why are churches allowing witches to do seances and tarot card readings in churches? Why are churches supporting, I don't know where y'all broadcast on, so I'll keep it algorithmically safe. Why are people supporting things with kids they shouldn't be? Because they're believing the lie. They are believing the deception. The deception is sent into the world by God so that those who do not love the truth will believe the lie. That's why we're seeing non-Christians be like, what is going on? Like so many non-Christians are saying, this is insane. Why? Because they actually do love the truth. They haven't found the truth, but they love truth. And so they're seeing the insanity of this world. There are going to be non-Christians who don't fall for the Antichrist. This is their awakening. We are in this era of deception. If you don't realize where we are, if you don't realize the deception is in the world, then you're going to fall for it. If you don't realize there are supernatural beings that are trying to deceive you and draw you away from God, you'll fall for it.
That's right.
That's why. Why does all this matter? Because it shows the Bible is true. If the Bible's true, then we need to change the way we view the world that we live in. It is not mechanistic.
Right.
It is not materialistic. It is a supernatural world full of supernatural beings, and a lot of them don't like you. And it's coming to an end, and you better get ready for it, because it's closing time, and things are about to get spicy. Like 3 a.m. on a Friday night, and the frat boys have had a bad day. Spicy. That's what we got.
Good analogy. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm just really blessed and impressed that your research, Jason, has not only spanned or examined, the thousands of years, but also that it's relevant for our immediate future and our present. Because if the Bible is real, then Revelation has come true, it is coming true. And that I just have to also tie this in with the paranormal stuff too, that Christians have actually had dreams and where they saw in their dreams, I mean, people that are unconnected on YouTube, random people that don't even know each other, have had these interesting revelatory dreams where they see a UFO hovering over major cities, over their home, like behind the clouds and what have you. And then all of a sudden they're raptured. These are people that are unconnected, don't know each other, not promoting each other's stuff, and they're having a similar dream where they see UFOs hovering around major cities over their home, behind the clouds, and they look like kind of like Independence Day, basically, and then boom, the rapture happens. And so the lie that's going to be proliferated, I believe, is that the aliens took those who were holding humanity back from evolving to the next level. And so that's why all these shows are out, Ancient Aliens, whatever it is. That's trying to push the lie that aliens are our creators and our progenitors. Aliens have raptured us, or not raptured. They're not even use that. Aliens have taken the lesser evolved people, such as the Christians, and so there's going to be people that believe that lie, because how else are you going to explain something supernatural like that, where all these loved ones and family members and friends or whoever have boom disappeared, and so that is one of the lies I believe that's going to be proliferated, and then but there are going to be people that will get saved and realize, oh my gosh, I rejected the notion of Christianity, I rejected Christ, that's why I'm here, or I lived a lukewarm life, that's why I'm still on earth. But yeah folks, I mean, things are going to get really real very soon, if you already haven't noticed. So the Bible is true, and all these creatures are just testifying to the veracity of the Bible and God.
Right.
I
I
mean,
like
that's
what
basically the bottom
how
line.
Jason shares, like, this is leading to an awakening regarding spiritual warfare. I would add to it also, in my mind, a great soul harvest, because the COVID lockdowns really woke a lot of people up and they became repentant of their worldly materialistic life. And if you go on
Yes.
TikTok, I don't download TikTok to your phone, but if you have an old phone that you don't mind if it's stained for life, go on TikTok and research Jesus, conspiracies, Christian TikTok. You will see billions of videos, views about everything we're talking about. Posted videos of like Derek Gilbert, Michael Heiser, Derek Prince, Alex Jones, other people, and they're just finding this for the first time. They're posting it to TikTok. This interview, if it doesn't get as many views as we want as it's being recorded, you might find in a few years after the next lockdowns, when they're all sitting bored and freaked out and like, "Jeez, the Strange O'Clock podcast. Oh my gosh, what he's saying, it's all coming true, man. They said it, because we're doing this
Right.
today on the 2nd of 12,
Just
2022. And last time I looked at my clock, it was 11:11. I'm not into that, but whatever. It's recent. It's
Yep.
recent,
that's
guys.
right.
It's not just a 15-year-old podcast from back in the height of Dr. Future. I don't know if you're familiar with the Future Quake podcast,
No, not
but this
particularly.
this all became new as the internet became more prolific with podcasts. There was this dialogue about Enoch and the fallen angels.
Yes. Hmm.
It's relatively recent. I would say the last 12 years. It's
Yeah.
really
Hmm.
exploded. So anyway, continue, sir. I know we're running out of time, but
Yes,
maybe
sir.
how should we boil this down and also plug?
Um,
'Cause you're everywhere, man.
Please
I'm looking
do.
at you.
How
okay.
do people get a hold of your work, and how do people get a hold of you?
Okay. Full disclosure, I'm what's called pre-wrath as far as the rapture, but and I'll just make one, and that's a whole other episode. I'll be happy to come
I
in and
am
talk about
too.
that.
I'm
Okay,
as
cool.
well.
So let me go one more step. I honestly, again, 10 years ago, I would have said aliens, it's going to be physical craft. But the last few seasons of Ancient Aliens has all been essentially Eastern, New Age religion stuff. I don't think it's
Really?
going to be, I honestly don't think it's going to be as materialistic as we tend to think. I think it will. I think because I do think the rapture occurs, it just happens at the end with with the resurrection. I think they're going to say, look, these aliens were here to protect us from this thing that's coming. God's rolled the sky back. Like, we need to go to war to fight this thing. Here's our alien brethren to help us. But we commune with them through drugs and DMT because they're our spiritual brothers as well. I think it's going to be way more blatant than we realize. And I started
Wow.
realizing this when
Wow.
when on Ancient Aliens, like, well, here's the thing about Satan. I think he's gotten a bad rap.
Yes.
It's like, oh, so someone was Kanye before Kanye was. Anyway, but you know, I'm like, okay. Like, and once I started hearing this, I'm like, okay, guys, I was probably I thought they'd have to hide it a lot more. I don't think they're gonna hide it very much at all. I think it'd be like, yep, we're the literal devil from the Bible, but that's okay because that was all a big misunderstanding, right?
Yeah.
It's all this Christian propaganda. We're actually the good guys. We're the guys.
Right.
We came to illuminate you.
Yeah.
So how to find me? Again, serialpapers.com. That's the easiest way to get to all my stuff, all my books on Amazon. It's got a link. By the way, for whatever reason, I've been trying. There's this weird book that shows up on my author's page on Amazon. I can't get rid of it, and I don't know who it is. It's just they assigned it to me. I'm like, I don't like. It's a guy holding a beer, and I'm like, what? It doesn't look like any of my other books at all. I'm like, what is going on? But yeah, all my books are on are on Amazon, but you can go to serialpapers.com. It's got links to Texas Front Porch and the Serial Papers YouTube site. I'm also now on Untold Radio with Dean Bertram. We review books that are paranormal
Awesome.
and cryptozoological articles, things like that. So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, or to, you want to contact my stuff. Again, Texas Front Porch, TEX' Front Porch, or Serial Papers, SIRU Papers. And I'm around, happy to come back. Y'all are great people. Love your show. I think it's going to be great.
Well, we definitely love your research, and we really admire you. You're a very not only intellectual, but you're biblical, spiritual, plus intellectual, which is a difficult thing to find these days. And we applaud you and others similar to yourselves, like Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Heiser, and other people like him and you. And so we thank you so very much from the bottom of our hearts that you were eager to appear as a guest on our show. And I was very blessed that you were responsive to me on Facebook. And so there's not a whole lot of people in your space. You're the pioneer, that's for sure. So you definitely need a pat on the back
Oh,
from
L.A.
us.
Marzulli. I mean, trust me. I'm just a
L.A.
dude in
Marzulli too.
Texas. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people who've been around doing this stuff. Derek Prince.
Oh yes.
And I'm terrible with names. I just forgot his name. There was a pastor. Anyway, I'm just a guy who likes to draw cartoons, right? I'm in this space because there's a gape in the broader Christian world, and I guess I'm just here to until somebody better comes along. So I'm here with great people like you. I love doing this, and if this is what God has for me, then I'm happy to do it until again somebody better shows up. So, which I hope happens soon, because we need people of real skill to show up, because it's getting spicy out there. But
Spicy. I like that.
it's getting spicy out there. So again, as long as it takes, I'll be here. Again, Siru Papers, SIRUpapers.com. It's got all the links. Go, and I'll be around until they come for me,
Absolutely.
which is going to happen eventually, I suppose.
They'll have to come for all of us, brother.
Right.
Well, you have our bow and
you
my
and us both.
axe, and we're all joining in this. And I think you know the reference there.
Oh,
if you're
yeah.
truly a nerd.
Oh,
Keep
I
doing
do.
your art, brother. I
Mhm.
think the artwork aspect, we are so busy with our writing and our podcasting and the things that we're trying to do, and the that's where it all starts. But then there's the running and the screaming. Sorry, I've watched Jurassic Park way too many times. Don't forget that part of, I mean, that's, if you're an artist, my sister's a great painter, but I love scrawling sketches, and it just doesn't, I don't have the time for it, and writing. But don't give that up. Don't let the other things bury that, because I believe that the next thing is going to be reaching the teenagers, and the teenagers will not listen to 3-hour podcasts. They will not read books even with cool covers, but they will look at comics, and any art that you do is going to help inspire, even if it's just whatever. I'd like to see your art, but Tolkien scrawled out these terrible little sketches in his books. I mean,
Yep.
if that didn't do something though, but that was the actual author, and it survives. So I hope you won't give that up, and I hope we'll do another show, because obviously I want to hear your eschatology.
Yes.
Like, it's exactly as mine. And the fringe Christian kind of community welcomes you, and I hope that you continue to do podcasts on many shows, and we'll be in touch, sir. So thank you so much. It was a great honor.
It's my pleasure.
Absolutely.
I'm honored.
Well, we're very honored, Jason. And yes, I would like to tip my invisible hat to you, Jason. Your artwork is amazing in your book. It's a 39-page book, folks. It's not a difficult read. I downloaded it onto my phone, Amazon Kindle, and it's 39 quick pages. If you're like me and you don't have time to visually read, you can just use Amazon Alexa app, and it'll read the book for you, basically. And that's how I got through it, while working, listening at the same time. And but I did have time to look at the artwork. So Jason had drawn the front of the cover of the book, and also the pictorials. They're amazing pictorials, especially the Nephilim head skull that doesn't have a mid-sagittal suture, versus a regular human skull that has a mid-sagittal suture. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And some other weird creatures, and he draws them very well. He's a very talented artist. So yeah, I definitely give you major kudos for your artwork, and we'd love to actually see more of that. In fact, I'd love to intersperse your artwork throughout this on this YouTube, when I publish it for YouTube, as well as to Spotify. And well, on Spotify they'll have to go to YouTube, but
buy copies for your teenagers.
Yeah, there you
Give
go.
them to your
That's right.
grandkids. I mean,
That's
I'm
right.
about to do that with our last one of our last guests, Brian Godawa. One of my nieces is a brilliant scholar. She's only like 11, but she's just top of her class, and her parents are strictly Christian. So I'm like, well, Brian Godawa has all these Christian books. Like, remember how we used to give Frank Peretti, or our parents gave us Frank
Yes.
Peretti? So I
Yes.
think you should keep that in mind. Like, if we have even one grandma or auntie who's like, for my kids, I'll do it. And I mean, that is how I got started, literally, with Rick Joyner's Final Quest. My mom gave that to me, and Frankie Peretti. I mean, we have to think about the next generation. I think of you, Jason, like you're the next generation. You're just sharp. You are very well, you're enunciating this stuff incredibly well, and you're fresh, you're full of fire. We need you to keep that torch of Heiser and just keep running forward with it, man. Like, he needs you, we need you. So
I don't know if I'm
God
sharp.
bless
I'm
you.
Amen.
highly caffeinated though.
Ah, well, cheers to that, sir. And
Yes.
thank you so
Cheers.
much. I know we're at
Cheers
two
with our
hours.
non-alcoholic beverage here. Cheers from my Propel here in Florida,
Water.
and
Yeah,
his mountain water and your
that's why
coffee probably.
this is literally from our yard. I just fill up this giant water bottle with the
Oh
hose,
wow.
and it's like the best water ever. I never get heartburn anymore. I used to get it all the time when I lived in Taiwan.
Hmm.
So,
Oh, it's the
anyways,
minerals. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's a real thing.
Hmm.
Thank you so much, Jason. Any last things you want to share with us?
If there's anything, if anything I say means anything at all, it's that the weird stuff in this world is real, but you don't need
That's
to.
right.
But the thing is, it's what your Bible tells you is there. It is what the Bible is saying. Your Bible properly describes the world. Yes, it is written in poetry. Yes, it is written to a different culture. You need to understand that culture to understand so that we can properly interpret it. All that's true. But the simple fundamental fact is the world the Bible tells you is the Bible tells you about is true, which means you need to believe if the beginning is true and the end is true, that means the middle is true.
Amen.
Jesus is true. His teachings are true. His love for
That's
you is
right.
true. And that also means you can leave it out all out on the field. We tend to like, well, if I go into, but what happens if, who cares? What happens if God's like, why didn't you leave it all in the field? You're not going to get extra points for turning in your body at the end of your life in a pristine manner. Leave it on the field. It's meant to be lived. The Bible is true. Let you allow yourself to believe what is written so you can live a life that he's calling you to live. And
Hallelujah.
that's it. That's the only
Amen.
message I have is Christ and him crucified. That's it. Everything else is up for grabs as far as I'm concerned.
Amen. I feel like I should
Amen.
just close this with prayer real quick. Is that okay, guys?
Please do.
Gentlemen, Father God, thank you so much for Jason and Michael and Jason's heart to expose the works of darkness in terms of these false philosophies and lies and deceptions of the New World Order and in academia and education, what have you, Father. Thank you, Lord, that he is illuminating the historical and creature truth, I guess, that's in the Bible, that all this weird stuff is actually true, and the Bible attests that. And I thank you, Lord, that you're using people like Jason and Michael and I to share the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ to other people. Lord, I just pray that you would just please lay it on people's hearts and minds to listen to the podcast. Who should listen? And in so doing, I pray, Lord, that they would just amplify, verify, confirm the word of God to them. And that most of all, that people would have an intimate personal relationship with you and see these things as they really are, Lord. And that they would just simply believe in their hearts that God raised Jesus from the dead and confess with their mouth the Lord Jesus. That for all who call upon the name of the Lord will be saved. And that the enemy comes to still kill and destroy, but Jesus has come to give us life and that more abundantly, and just show everybody that you've come to give them life and that more abundantly, Lord. And all they need to do is receive you into their hearts as their Lord and Savior, and turn away from their
Amen.
sins and get to know you through the Word of God, your love letter to them, Father. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
And
Amen.
Beautiful.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. I really,
Hallelujah.
really appreciate it. Hallelujah.
Thank you so much again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Strange O'Clock podcast, in which we interview Jason McLean, the author of How UFOs and Bigfoot Prove the Bible is True. We hope that you found it interesting, fun, and informative. If you thought it was great, if you could give us a good rating and review on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify, and go to YouTube as well to subscribe, like, and share it, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. I hope you have a good morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are out in the world. God bless. Bye-bye.